Hey there, kind traveler. I'm at MSN right now, and I'm reading the website or the damn title to the headline, and it's genetics has learned a ton, mostly about white people. That's a problem. Let's go ahead and keep it pushing. Again, I didn't write this shit, so please take it with a grain of salt. In the future, it's possible that when you go in for a physical, your doctor will, along with the usual blood pressure test and blood work, analyze your genome for health risks lurking in the code of your DNA. It is possible your genome will suggest you're at high risk for developing heart disease. If you are, your doctor may start the cholesterol lowering drugs, may start you on cholesterol lowering drugs early, or could also maybe make predictions about what other medications are most likely to work to prevent the disease. A treatment plan like this, tailored to individual genetic risk, is one of the great promises of precision medicine. Whether genomic analysis will ever yield enough useful results to make it possible is a subject of heated debate. If it does pan out, it could be a game changer. Though, as it stands, the game won't be changed for everyone. If you're not white, this new research may fail you. And the new age of precision medicine is going to be equitable, we'll have to fix. If the new age of precision medicine is going to be equitable, we'll have to fix this. There's an important lesson in diversity and genetics lurking here too. It's not that people of different ethnic backgrounds have wildly different biology. It's much more subtle and fascinating than that. We need to explore the vast range of human genetic variation. It could still end up saving us all. Genetic predictions work better for white people, European ancestry, for a simple reason. There was a hypothetical problem. This is not a hypothetical problem. Last week, Color Genomics announced that next year it would release a risk test for heart disease. When it debuts, MIT Technology Review reports the product will be only useful for people of white European ancestry. Though again, many scientists think genetic risk research is too preliminary for these risk tests to be sold to any consumer. Color is also its test to cover more people. Funny that they say color. However, but the reason the test won't work for most of the world population is simple. Most participants in the studies that yield predictive insights, genome-wide association studies, or GWAS for short, are of white ancestry. In all, white people of European ancestry make up 80% of the participants in all these studies, despite only representing a fraction of the world's population. This is a vast disparity. This is a vast disparity, and it has been getting a whole lot better, says Alicia Martin, a geneticist at the Broad Institute who has co-authored papers on racial disparities in genetics research. You can also see the disparity clearly in the following chart. It plots the numbers of individuals used in GWAS's study over time. While there was some progress in recent years, the participants are still overwhelmingly white, despite the fact that white Europeans represent just a fraction of the world's population. The disparity matters for a simple reason. We are developing genetic risk tools that people of color will not benefit from unless we do a genetic risk studies for them too. It's adding to the long-term problem of people of color being excluded from medical research, and it could also end up being healthcare disparities in America, are stark, which are already stark and stubborn. For instance, in the past few years, researchers have learned that genetic variants that can contribute to asthma in white children aren't the same for African American children. Imagine a hypothetical genetic test at infancy that could be used to start preventive asthma treatment on the first day of life. It would be a great tragedy if all these tools were not useful for African American children who are disproportionately affected by asthma. When minorities aren't included in scientific research, they can suffer. The cures derived from the research may not work as well for them. Diagnostic tests may fail them. Again, this isn't just a hypothetical. It has already happened in some cases. Genetic risk explained. You may recall the high school biology that a strand of DNA is made up of a single nucleotide: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. These are the letters that spell out the recipe for our biology. You, me, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Kim Kardashian, indeed, of all humanity, share 99.9% of all the identical letters of DNA. That obviously doesn't make you the same. I'm going to keep it pushing, and I'm going to explain that later. GWAS looks for the sites of the genome where we commonly differ from one another. These sites are called single nucleotide polymorphisms, aka SNPs or SNPs, and they're simply spots where you might have the nucleotide adenine and I'll have a cytosine. Obviously, the codes aren't the same. Some of the SNPs are meaningful for our health and activate the biological pathways that make some of us taller than others, shorter than others, and or healthier than others. Others are just kind of randomly acquired through generations and don't tell us all that much besides our genetic ancestry, our geographic ancestry. To be very clear, African, Asian, Native American, Ashkenazi Jew, and European biology is not different from one another. That's a lie. None of this is evidence that a race is a biological construct, which it isn't. That's another lie. What can be different among various ethnic groups is patterns of genes we inherit from our families. It's a difference in terms of disease and what causes disease, says Emmanuel Pepra, a global health student scientist at NYU. That doesn't make sense. If you're biologically the same, the shit that makes you healthy or not healthy shouldn't be different. Most humans will be at higher risk of heart attacks when there's more LDL cholesterol in their blood. That's the basic biology. The differences here are more about why about LDL accumulates greatly in one person and not another. That's because they're not the same. There are some diseases and physical traits that are caused by a change in a single gene. Examples include sickle cell disease, which affects African Americans, and Huntington's disease, which deteriorates nerve cells in the brain. Whether the bottom of your earlobe sticks out the side of your face or hang free is a result of one gene. But even more diseases and physical traits are polygenic. For instance, there are hundreds of locations in genome that influence diabetes, and each of them changes the odds of developing diabetes minutely. Heart disease is polygenic, so is intelligence and height. Once again, they can't tell you that everybody's the same and then tell you that it's multi-genetics that are affected on a singular gene. That doesn't make sense. But I'm going to break that down in my video after this. Why GWAS or GWAS studies with Europeans don't generalize well to other groups. Because we're not the same people, biologically or none of that shit. I can't express this stuff to you guys enough. I've been talking about this for about 2 years now, and it's just now starting to come full circle. There are some legitimate reasons most GWAS to date have involved only Europeans. For one, most genetic research funding comes from white majority countries. One of the largest repositories of genetics data is the UK Biobank, which has nearly 500,000 participants of white European ancestry. For these studies to work, that is, for them to yield genetic markers that most accurately predict biological outcomes, researchers have to limit subject pools to people of a common ancestry. This allows them to control the SNPs that have nothing to do with the disease or trait that they're studying. What they're trying to say right now is that they actually don't know shit about other people and they only care about white people. Keeping it pushing. For instance, if you did a GWAS for height that included both Southern and Northern Europeans, you'd find that the gene for lactose tolerance, the ability to drink milk without stomach problems, is associated with height. This gene has nothing to do with it, or very little to do with it. This gene has nothing to do with, or very little to do with height. But it is picking up on the fact that from Northern Europeans tend to be taller than Southern Europeans, and that they coincidentally are more likely to be lactose intolerant. Did you hear that? Taller people of white descendancy are normally lactose. GWAS in this case isn't identifying biology of height. It's identifying gene variants that are accidentally correlated with ancestry, says Graham Coop, a population geneticist at UC Davis, who walked me through this example. If you were trying to predict disease risk in East Asians with insights derived from a European GWAS, you do a little less than half as well in terms of prediction accuracy, Martin says. And if you look at an African American population, you do about a quarter as well. That's because the people of East Asian and just Asian ancestry in general have a closer genome and biological structure to Europeans than African Americans do, obviously. Let me keep it pushing. Even controlling for ancestry, researchers don't always know the exact biological purpose for SNPs uncovered by GWAS. And there's another reason when generalizing GWAS. That's GWAS, right on. I can't think of what it is exactly, but I've already said it, so. And I know it has something to do with the freaking genetic stuff. Results from one population to another. The GWAS don't just pick up on the variants that contribute to a disease. They pick up on the variants that are coincidentally correlated with the disease variants. Yes, they work on our gene. Yes, the way they work on our genes is extremely confusing. It's not really that confusing. And I'm gonna explain all this stuff real quick. I'm gonna just hit that real fast. What they just said right there, right, was that these tests and this research has the ability to pick the genome, right on, that not only causes the disease, but other variants in your phenotype or your genotype that it may also affect as well. Let me keep it pushing. The patterns of these correlations differ from one ancestral group to the next, and a part of the reason the predictive power of GWAS diminishes from one group to the next. So what it's saying is that everything depends on how you're put together. If they're not the same, then you can't predict it the same because they're not the same. It's just that simple. It's like trying to predict what a dog is going to do based on what a cat does. It's not going to work. Or what a lion is going to do based on what a tiger does. If you want to bring it somewhere closer, but still not the same. When we don't do genetics research, and this is when it says everyone loses when genetics research is not diverse. When we don't do genetics research on diverse populations, we are not only risking widening health disparities, we risk missing out on new biology that will help us all. When researchers only look at European DNA, they find genetic disease variants that are common among Europeans. But if we study non-European populations, we start to find variants that contribute to diseases that are common in those populations, but are rarer in European populations, Martin says. We'd actually learn new biology. We could also find more cures. PCSK9 inhibitors are a new class of cholesterol-lowering drugs that show promise in lowering the chance of heart disease beyond what statin drugs can do alone. Doctors debate whether these new drugs will be worth the cost. Regardless, they're a breakthrough, a novel way to prevent heart disease, and these drugs were discovered because researchers noticed that some African Americans had mutations in their PCSK9 genes that led them to very low LDL cholesterol in their bloodstream. So some black people have very good low have very good low cholesterol, and they try to figure out what the fuck is that. Keeping it pushing, and they used it to help white people. We need to explore human genetic diversity to make game-changing insight. This is something people may misunderstand about evolution. Species survive because of diversity. When changes come, there is someone somewhere who can help our species survive. Genetics is helping us to find those beneficial adaptations and bring them to a broader world. What they're trying to say is that white people don't want to get bred out, and they're trying to figure out a way to keep their genome alive if they continue to die the way that they're dying and continue to amalgamate with people the way they continue to amalgamate. Keeping it pushing. Here's what needs to change. It's not that individual GWAS studies need to include diverse participants. It's that these GWAS need to be redone population by population to ensure their generalizability. So what they're trying to say right now is that they need to scrap the old shit, don't add on to it, do different ones per group so that way you get exact information, and then you compare the information by the groups. And keeping it pushing. Just as there was a GWAS study on hundreds of thousands of Europeans to assess genetic risk for heart attacks, there needs to be a study on many of African origin, Asian origin, and so on. It is changing, but too slowly. In 2009, 96 of the participants in the GWAS study were of European descent. In 2016, the number had dropped to 80% participants. There are projects in the works to diversify genetics research, which offer some reason for hope. Notably, the NIH is currently recruiting for a program called All of Us. With it, the NIH aims to recruit 1 million people across the country to participate in long term studies of the intersections of genetics, lifestyle, environment, and health. The goal: get 75% participants from groups who are typically underrepresented in biomedical research, with at least 500,000 participants from racial and ethnic minorities. If they want to get 1 million people, they want half of them to be black. Did you hear that? They're trying to figure out why white people and black people are different right now. And they're trying to figure out how to steal genetic properties to add them to the genome of a white person while they're still in a fucking embryo, so that way they don't have heart disease. And they're trying to figure out how to make superhumans, in short, but I'm going to keep it pushing. You really can't have precision medicine for all of us if all of us don't participate and aren't reflected in the research and studies. Dara Richardson Heron, Chief Engagement Officer of the All of Us program, says Richardson Heron recognizes that there's a long earned historical mistrust of medical studies, particularly among African Americans. There's no shit. They used to steal free blacks off the streets and pluck holes in their fucking heads and put hot rods in them. You shouldn't trust them. Also concerning how white supremacists are seizing on genetic science and distorting it for self-aggrandizing aims. Come on, dog. Right. So you're telling me right now, and I'm about to finish up this article, that in the article, they wait till the very end to talk about white supremacy, so-called, right? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's just keep it pushing. But this data needs to be collected if healthcare is going to advance equitably. There's a real chance if people aren't involved in the research, they may not benefit from the advances, she says. And everyone, I think, wants a better health for their families. This is all the devil's work. This is all the devil's work. Black people, stay the fuck away from the doctors. Stay the fuck away from this blood work. I am going to drop the dime on their monkey asses. Please be on the lookout.